I'm gonna switch over to my gaming scene so I can what I need to do.
Oh yeah. And I've got things set up on my end. Well, set up as
Okay,
best
perfect.
as I'll be able to. And let's see, I did send in the invitation.
Oh, did you? Oh shit.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go.
And
Is it still not showing? Okay, there we go. There we go. Don't mind the quality, you guys. We're at 720.
yeah,
And 30 FPS.
real top tier stuff. And before I even get into this, I do want to give my thanks that you were willing to do this particular thing and work with Time Zone Hell to make this thing work.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm gonna make it work no matter what the circumstances are. I'm gonna make that shit work.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. And for those of you who do not know me, my name is Mildra. I am your one and only gaming monk. Some of you may know me from the time I submitted my designs to a Smash or Pass stream a while back, and that resulted in one thing leading to another, leading all the way to this crazy idea that I had pitched. It probably won't be the last time, because I did inform Vixie here that there are 4 Resident Evil board games, all of them by Steamforged Games, and all of them on Tabletop Simulator.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited for that. Whatever we do there, whenever you get the chance, hit me up for that, because I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be there and with my pants off. I mean, with well,
as far
I mean, damn. Don't let me see the Leon figure. That's all I gotta tell you.
Look, I know what happens in casinos. I'll put it that way.
You don't know nothing. Not in this casino. Nothing's normal.
I know enough to not talk about the Roppongi incident.
Moving on.
Yes.
Moving on. Oh my god.
And we're walking.
Keep on moving.
I don't want to do anything that's going to get... I'd say I'm not going to do anything that's going to get me in trouble, but depending on who you ask, I am trouble.
Oh lord. A troublesome monk, never heard of before, at least not in my eyes.
I know a lot of people have this idea of monks being highly pious and all of that. Allow me to disabuse some of you all of that notion. Because what you're describing are not monks, you're describing priests. Monks, well, more often, you'll have some who are high and mighty, and then you'll have some who are the tell it like it is, because giving you what you actually need to hear kind of approach. I happen to fall into the latter.
We love that. We love how we love honesty here. That's all I gotta say. Tell it as it is, or else just don't say it all.
Yeah. And the truth is going to be delivered to you regardless of what you have to say. And because I haven't confirmed whether or not Vixie has Tabletop Simulator quite yet, which I have a feeling will happen in time, and
it will,
and
eventually.
when it does, the board games will be revisited. I think there was also a card game, but that's a separate matter.
Resident Evil card game? Where can I buy this? Where?
pretty much anywhere that
just,
that sells
I'm
card
gonna need
games
you to
has it.
send the link immediately. I'm gonna have a shrine of this shit. I mean,
Yeah.
am I allowed to curse?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Perfect.
I've worked with people who have served over the years, and I have learned not to get in the way of military style humor. So there's no curse word you can utter that I haven't heard already, if not worse.
Well, I curse more than a sailor, and my friend Ash can vouch because he was one.
I've worked with people in pretty much every branch, except for the redheaded stepchild that is the Coast Guard.
Oh my, we don't talk about the Coast Guard.
Yeah. Some people have gotten offended for me making all the crayon jokes with the Marines, but I'm like, they have a crayon section at the gift shop in some of their bases. They're in on the joke.
It's. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they eat them at that point.
I've heard worse.
I will not.
Especially involving someone improvising with a fiber cloth at the water closet is how I'll phrase that. Yes, I hope none of you were eating today.
You can't keep making crayon jokes around Marines. They eat them all, and then look, kids cry. Oh no!
It's like the blonde moment jokes. I'll stop making that joke when it stops applying. So I've told a friend of mine, you do not have to have blonde hair to have a blonde moment.
This is true. No, actually, I have dark hair, and I have the most blondest moments I've ever had in the last couple of years of being a VTuber. Being a VTuber made me blonde. And
for me, I've had to clean up people's messes. I'll put it that way. And in the process, some people, I have to look at what they did and go, okay, explain this to me like I'm 12, so I understand what the hell you screwed up. and then afterwards put you in for stretching practice for about 30 minutes.
What kind of stretching practice are we talking about here?
The kind of stretching practice that you would see amateur wrestlers get put through.
Oh, never mind. Anyway.
The kind where a safe word will not save you.
Damn. I don't use safe words. Excuse me, something was in my throat.
Yes. So, we have such sights to show you. But I will note that a big part of my crusade, part of my creed, has been bridging the gaps between different fandoms, and especially using things like tabletop games as a medium to do that, which is why I bring up things like a board card game of something like Resident Evil, or have explored the idea of doing campaigns set in that universe, because, well, I've done it. Admittedly, one of them was a long time ago using All Flesh Must Be Eaten, which is long since out of print, but it can be done.
I've never heard the title before.
Yeah, All Flesh Must Be Eaten. It was a zombie apocalypse TTRPG that was made by Eden Studios back in the 90s. It started out.
Oh, Ash, you would know that, right? Because you're old.
It started out, and I see Ash saying, "I want to play D&D Resident Evil." Let me stop you right there. Using Resident Evil with D&D's rule set would be a terrible, terrible idea, and anyone trying to do that should be keelhauled publicly.
Crucified, even. You sound so traumatized saying that. Are you okay? Are you okay?
I have been at this for a long time, and I have seen people try to put a round peg in a square hole. I see Ash saying, "Well, I meant a TTRPG style involving RE." See, you should have said that first. Then you wouldn't be getting grilled.
Okay, you have to give my husband a break. He's a little troubled with words.
Skill issue. As my
damn.
as my mentor would say, get more gooder.
Oh Lord.
But
People leave. No. No, 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 no. You're not allowed to leave. Sit, boy. You're not allowed to leave.
yanking the leash, are you?
I'll always. Fucking always.
Fair.
Every
Fair.
single day.
Fair. I'm not going to dispute that. But when it comes to something like All Flesh Must Be Eaten, it started out as a standard zombie apocalypse kind of game, and then it got interesting, where it started doing expansions on like voodoo style zombies and even a zombie parody of the WWF. It got all over the place.
That does not sound very profitable in any kind of way, because then you're just fucking up the original game.
It was made by the original developers, so.
Oh my. That is not. Oh. Yeah, see, you can't just branch out randomly, because then your fandom's gonna be like, what the fuck is going on?
It did pretty well at the time, so the thing about RPGs, a lot of people have this idea that it's this one certain thing, especially if all they know is just one game like D&D, but it is much more accurate to consider it like a universe. And a given game is a sandbox for people to go into whatever type of adventure they want to. And because of that, saying, "Oh, I'd like to run a Resident Evil TTRPG" is one thing, but the next question you have to answer is, okay, what angle are you going to take? Are you just going to replicate one of the games, which I wouldn't advise because that'd be kind of pointless? Are you going
Yeah, because it's already canon. There's no point.
Are you going to be going alternate universe, which has some legs? Are you going to be, and even within that question, there's the issue of all the different tones. Are you going more horror? Are you going more action? Are you going a little bit in between? What type of horror are you going with? All of these kind of things have to be considered.
D&D is so popular because it's simpler to make up a world with the predefined rules. True. That is true. Like, I don't play D&D. I want to play D&D.
I will call the world thing into question. And I'm not putting myself on a pedestal, but I have been up and down with D&D for a very long time, since I was arguably too young to do it. Because I got my start with the black box books in the 90s. But the popularity of these is more of the name, and that popularity has taken a significant hit due to the OGL fiasco a couple years ago. Now, I did a video on that.
Don't know what that is.
OGL is Open Gaming License. This was something that was put forth in 2000 as a kind of peace offering when Wizards of the Coast took over. And for the longest time, it allowed third parties to make content using D&D's rule set.
Thank you so much. That was bothering me. I was gonna say something. Oh, that was bothering me.
Yeah, without having to worry about lawsuits, because, well, it was a peace offering.
Also, just legal things. Got it.
Yeah, but it wasn't a binding contract. It was a kind of a gentleman's agreement. In the style of open licenses that are used in like software. Then,
got it. Okay.
About 2 years ago, Wizards of the Coast decided that they were going to retroactively change it and cause the shitstorm to end all shitstorms. Because there was the issue of, okay, if it changes, does that mean that that the new changes retroactively affect all of the incarnations of that setup up until that point, because keep in mind, that license was established in 2000. So you're dealing with thousands upon thousands of books. And truth be told, if Wizards of the Coast did get sue happy, they wouldn't have had the funds to sue that many people. But
true.
It ended up dying a death largely because there was the question of what sort of precedent that would end up setting, especially for like software licenses. I also don't think it was a coincidence that they backed off of the whole thing right around the same time one of their investors was publicly shit-talking them on social media. And I was there.
That's crazy. What the fuck?
I was like,
what is going on in the D&D world? What the hell?
Yeah. And because the investor had said that doing this move just before the movie was going to come out was, to quote him, an unforced error. And the movie, of course, I'm referring to is Honor Among Thieves, which was okay, but it had the misfortune of coming out about a week after John Wick Chapter 4 and 2 weeks before Super Mario Brothers. It had no chance.
Didn't watch Super Mario Brothers, and didn't watch John Wick either.
Point is, both of those are projects
profitable movies. I know.
Yeah, and had a lot of audience enthusiasm. But of course, there were a bunch of other things. They did a whole post-mortem on it, but a lot of people, as a result of that, ended up getting off the boat, including several of my own colleagues. Mostly because even though the open gaming license was eventually put into a Creative Commons license, a lot of people had the mindset of, well, if it was that easy for you to fuck me, what's stopping you from doing it twice?
That's true. The movie was good. It was put between two very good movies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I never watched the movie. I saw the trailer and everything, and I thought it looked good. I just never. I don't go outside enough anymore, so I didn't go and watch it, unfortunately.
And
being put between two very popular fandoms, that's literally just that's an insta kill for your movie. Unfortunately, that's just how the business works when it comes to movies.
Pretty much, it's the reason why some game releases will avoid being in the same month as certain high profile releases. But I'm very much a tailor when it comes to TTRPGs. Trying to find the right game for the right table that fits the right tone that they're going for. And using D&D to do Resident Evil would not even be in my top 50. Not when there are games specifically designed around horror that would be more fitting. I mean, in theory, could you use it? Yeah, but you'd have to do so much house ruling and homebrewing that you'd fall into the same trap that Bethesda does with all the homebrews you have to do to make their games work.
I don't know like half of what you just said. I'm being so honest. I don't know shit about D&D. So when somebody starts talking about D&D, I'm completely lost.
Well,
I am not knowledgeable.
When it comes to it, I'm referring to tabletop as a whole, and well, teaching people this kind of thing has been something I've been doing since long before anyone knew who I was. I used to run classes to help people learn how to play.
Oh, that's so cool. Wait, that's actually pretty sweet. Will I pay attention? Absolutely not. You gotta put Leon on the screen. Jingle jingle. My attention span is dog shit.
I know how to play to my audience. But
jingle jingle.
Well, at least I know the right kind of bait. Put put a Leon plushie on a hook just leave it on a tree or something, like a Wile E. Coyote or some shit.
Best bait to get me out. A Leon blush on a fucking hook.
Yeah,
I won't notice.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's like the whole box held up by a stick gag.
Literally. I wouldn't even be paying attention to the fucking box and stick. I'd only be paying attention to the blush. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I want.
But as a forwarding of bridging the gap, we have this particular tier experiment. Now, obviously, I've done a bit of messing about. Instead of having letter grades, I have names of different characters, because I think it's important to establish some ground rules when it comes to doing these sort of tier lists, so it's not just, oh, this one's good, this one's bad, yada yada. That's gonna happen, but best to establish the floor. And one of the key rules here is all entries relative to their generation.
Gotcha. Okay.
It would be very unfair of me to compare like a game in the PS1 era to a game in the GameCube era, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I know Resident Evil Nemesis, that one does have a release on GameCube. I know that one does.
Yeah, and obviously remakes have to be approached during their generation.
Yeah.
So the remakes of like Resident Evil 1 through 4 that we've had over the last few years, those have to be looked at within the current generation. So they have to be looked at within the same ballpark as like Resident Evil 7 and 8. Because same general generation essentially. Now instead
so let's go ahead and put Resident Evil Resistance and Versus all the way in hunk tier. That shit was ass.
So
let's go ahead and put them in there.
We'll get to them in time. But when it comes to the tiers, this was how I had it in mind. So at the top we have Leon tier. These are the high watermarks that you can recommend to just about anybody, even if they're not familiar with the franchise. A lot of your jumping off entries can fall into this category as well. Then right below that we have the Ada Wong tier. These are for ones that are close to Leon tier, but not quite. There's a couple things that might hold them back. Almost greatness, essentially. Then below that we have the Jill Valentine tier. These are for ones that are all right. They're right in the middle. Then right below that we have the Chris tier. These are for ones that they're certainly workable, but they have some asterisks, some elephants in the room to deal with. And then right below that we have the hunk tier. These are ones that are the most at your own risk, or are only worth it if you're the hardest of the hardcore. And as far as why I picked Hunk for the bottom one, well, because Hunk is always the sole survivor in any mission that he's in.
Exactly. He's an unkillable unit.
Unkillable unit and the unluckiest man in existence. But we start with the original 96 Resident Evil, which I think has to be put in Jill tier, just because...
I also think so. Like, there's a lot of... I would say in the story-wise, very good. It really starts you off with how Resident Evil is as a whole. Has BOWs, there's ridiculous characters, there's going to be funny gags, there's seriousness to it. Definitely a good start if you want to, kind of dip your toes into Resident Evil while not completely understanding everything. Because you really don't have to understand too much to understand what's going on in the entire lore. I'll explain it for you.
Yeah, and obviously some of the memes, but I would also be remiss if I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
bring up the live action ads that were actually directed by Romero.
True. So true.
I mean,
We
those
don't
ads.
talk about we don't talk about some of the live actions. So dear.
Yeah.
Going to Raccoon City. That was debated my existence.
The Japanese ads I have a bit of a soft spot for in that so bad it's good kind of way.
Oh, the stage plays are really good as well.
Yeah.
Very good.
But then we have 2, which honestly I'm fine with putting 2 in Ada tier.
A tier. Yes, absolutely. No bias at all, you guys, I promise.
Mm-hmm. Like
none at all.
This was the game that was the breakout moment for Hideki Kamiya. And by saying his name, I'm probably blocked again. Oh.
Damn.
And
putting my opinion on it, I would say this Resident Evil 1, or the original Resident Evil, of course, was a big breakthrough for Capcom, but Resident Evil 2, because it expanded so much on the story and the characters that they could involve and grow on, huge props to them for even making the game, because this was their make or break kind of game. Very good story. I can't say very good gameplay anymore because it's outdated as hell and it makes me mad. I almost punched out my monitor the other day playing that shit. I hate emulators and I hate the old controls, but really good game.
Yeah, I know a lot of people give guff for the tank controls, but I think it's important to keep in mind the predecessor when it comes to it that pretty much had that as its default, and that was the Alone in the Dark games, especially the original. And to a certain extent, Sweet Home, but Sweet Home's a weird beast.
Sweet Home's a very weird. I think that's why I am the way I am, because if not a lot of people know this, but Resident Evil was actually inspired by Sweet Home, and there's some shit going on in Sweet Home. I don't know what it is, but like, dear God, what the fuck were y'all smoking when you were making that shit? I'm traumatized. Please.
Yeah. But then we have Resident Evil 3, which I don't hate, but there was only a turnaround time of less than a year.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Resident Evil 3, the original, it's kind of on the brink of Jill tier, but it's Chris tier for me.
Yeah,
that's my opinion, at least.
And it should be noted, 2 came out in January 1998. 3 came out in November 1999. So it's a very jumping after a week of that kind of thing. I think the main thing that people take away from it is Nemesis T-type. But
yes.
Beyond that, if it didn't have Nemesis constantly dogging you, then it probably wouldn't have been as memorable.
But yeah, I would say with Nemesis's how do you say this? Nemesis's creation, and introducing tyrants is like a really big problem that you can deal and will have to deal with in your game going through Resident Evil. It was the biggest knack to it that made it very popular. Nemesis? No, I'm talking about only one Nemesis. Also high depper.
Yeah, but this is put somewhat out of order in the list.
Oh Lord, what happened?
The next one that's supposed to be on the list is Resident Evil Survivor, not Code Veronica. Survivor came out in 2000. And
yes.
Doing a I will note that there's 2 approaches that you can take with it. If you approach it as a light gun game, then it's fine. But the non-light gun part of it in the North American release was part of the reason for the game having a more infamous reputation.
Hard agree. Very hard agree. Cannot lie. Where are we thinking of putting it? I'm thinking
I'm putting it
Chris
in Chris
here. Yeah, okay, we are in agreement.
Like it's
like the stories in Resident Evil are usually so good. They're very good, very well written, but something about Survivor kind of throws me off sometimes. Just a little bit. I don't know I don't know exactly where I could put my finger on it, but it kind of throws me off. Because when I'm putting 2 and 2 together, I'm like, who the fuck is this? What is happening? Survivor's that one game that just confuses me a little.
Yeah. It's very clear it was made to be a light gun affair, because in the 90s and 2000s, a large amount of Capcom's money was still in arcades.
Yeah. Because they didn't have the the hard console income coming just yet, compared to their further games. Is that a spider on my wall? Oh my god, it's oh! Sorry, there's a spider on my wall.
Well then. But after that, in fact, a month later, we get Code Veronica. And I think that's another reason why Survivor...
Can we go ahead and put that in Leon tier? That was a really good game. I really liked Code Veronica. Having Claire as the main protagonist, very good idea. The story, banger. The characters, banger. I love that game. It's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. And I think one of the other reasons you felt a bit off regarding Survivor is specifically the release timeframes. Code Veronica, at least the Dreamcast version, came out a month after Survivor.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, you're not wrong. That is definitely why I don't like Survivor very much.
Which means that it was likely developed by a B team while an A team was working on Code Veronica.
Yeah. There's definitely a huge difference with the games, and it's like,
I will admit that there's some RNG elements that make Code Veronica a bit more difficult for speedrunners.
Yeah, oh my god.
But
which one? That's Resident Evil 0. Where it goes back into the what is the Spencer Manor.
But then in November of 2001, we would get Survivor 2 Code Veronica, which I think this, if I'm being honest, this one, I was a little bit kind to the original Survivor. Survivor 2, I am a little bit less inclined.
It's not completely mid, but it's kind of mid.
I'm putting it in hunk tier.
I agree. Like, it's not completely dog, but it's just not like really a fan favorite in my opinion.
Yeah, and for depending on where you are, it'd be tricky to get because it didn't come to North America.
Oh. It didn't do that great.
Plus, light gun games at home do not have the best track record.
True. No, you're actually so right on that though. It's a hit or miss with them, really. Like, either you hit it right on the point where you can enjoy the entirety of the game, even though it's like that, or you completely miss your target and you're fucked. The game's not going to do well. Don't even try to release it anywhere else.
There's only 2 franchises I can think, light gun franchises I can think of that did reasonably well on home console, in one form or another. and that is House of the Dead and Point Blank.
Hmm.
And as much as I love Time Crisis to death, I will dump all the quarters in that when I'm in an arcade. It didn't have... Time Crisis 4 pretty much killed it in home consoles.
Hmm.
It was just a very, very bad port. And sometimes that can happen. You can have a very good arcade game that, when it comes to the home console version, just wasn't that good.
Yeah. Again, hit or miss.
But then we have Gaiden, which came out in 2001 in December on the Game Boy Color, which honestly, this thing was better than it had any right to be.
That's true. I cannot lie. I hard agree. It's either a Leon tier or an Ada tier. Not a lot of people know Gaiden. Unfortunately, I have dug myself so far into the Resident Evil hole where I literally researched all of the games in existence. Gaiden's definitely a really good game. If you want to get into Resident Evil, don't start with Gaiden, but definitely work your way towards it. Very good game. I don't want to spoil anything, but very good game.
Also, Ash, Duck Hunt was only one game. I'm not counting that.
Damn. You sound more pissed off at him than I am whenever I actually am pissed off at him.
Oh. But of course, then we have the 2002 remake of the original Resident Evil, which I ended up grabbing late because I was late to the party when it came to the GameCube.
I really like the remake of Resident Evil. I would say, I'm not gonna lie, they did it very well for me. Like, I know it's an older remake compared to their newer ones, but I still really, really like it. Very good. Very fucking good.
Yeah.
Story pretty much is the same. They did make a few tweaks on it, but nothing super major. I hated that big fucking... I don't know if I'm thinking of the right one, but that Yama, that bitch. Ooh, goddamn, you pissed me off. Motherfucker, because I know I know several Resident Evil games, at least the later ones, they do take place in the Spencer Manor, which is where Yama is, and I hate that fuck ass snake.
Just remember, folks, no step on Sneck.
I'm stepping on that bitch.
Oh.
I'm stomping it out.
Yeah. But I'd say I'm not willing to put it in Leon tier, but I would be willing to put it in Ada tier.
It's a good game for a late or like an early remake in the remake kind of series. I like it. I like it.
Yeah. Of course, that same year we would have Resident Evil 0.
Which is where we kind of get a lot more lore behind Spencer and pretty much the Spencer Manor. We get introduced to Lisa and all kinds of different things, especially the leeches, which is what you mentioned earlier. Malice, the slug type creatures. They're actually leeches that are pretty much like a hive mind. There's a queen leech that takes over Spencer's body. And not trying to spoil too much for anyone who wants to actually play Resident Evil 0. Just a really good game. Highly recommend it. It's probably one of their best in their later or earlier installments.
Oh yeah. And as far as 0, would you put that in Leon tier, or do you think it should be in Ada?
I would. I personally would put it in Leon tier. It's a really good game.
Which is funny because when I go back and look at articles and reviews at the time, because somehow I've morphed into being a journalist doing this for over 10 years. Apparently 0 at the time was very divisive.
I heard that.
like a lot of people had thought that it didn't break the mold enough, which to that I say I don't believe that for a minute, because those are the people who have that same energy when saying that something broke the mold too much. So it's like what the hell do you want from me?
I break the mold, I don't break the mold. The fuck do you want from me, dog?
Yeah. And I do think this is where the whole idea of really digging into multiple protagonists starts to becomes standard, starts to take shape.
Yeah.
The cocoon that would become a butterfly in games down the road. But
yes, definitely.
Then there was another return to light guns with Dead Aim.
They really like their little fuck ups here and there. It's really great.
Yeah.
Can we just where the fuck? Okay. No hate, no complete hate to it, but it's either Chris or Hunked here for me. It's just it does so little but so much at the same time for me. Like, it doesn't really... I'm a story-heavy type of person. I might not be able to pay attention, but when a story actually catches my attention, then I'm locked the fuck in. I want to know every detail. That game just doesn't do it for me. It's not it.
Yeah, it has its moments, but this is a case of building a game around a gimmick, which is a very big thing to gamble. And and when you gamble, eventually the house always wins. But I'm putting that in Hunk tier, because it's fine in the moment, but the problem is when you contrast, and I know I don't mean to pick on the light gun games, but when you contrast them with what other light gun games were doing, it doesn't exactly match up.
Yeah. Like, when you constantly kind of turn on and off that switch of your games, of being a gun game and then being a story-heavy game, it doesn't really work if it can't actually be in unison and have a good balance. It doesn't work. And you can't just pick and choose.
Most light gun games that have been successful build themselves around their gameplay and have the story as just a means to an end, and are upfront about that. Like, Time Crisis is never going to win any Emmys with its storytelling. And it's not trying to. Same with, like, House of the Dead. But then we come to 2003 and we get to the Outbreak duology. Resident Evil Outbreak and File Number 2.
Yes. Also, Ash does bring up a good point. With Resident Evil 0, it was very linear, but I kind of liked that. It was a little linear. I didn't mind that at all, because at least the story was straightforward, actually makes sense, and I could follow it into the next game that actually connected to the fucking game and not that fuck-ass gun game.
I've seen cases of games that try to open up in the name of not being linear, and it ends up resulting in games that are kind of sprawling. I've talked about the TNT Evolution expansion for Doom 2 and why that one has the reputation it does. Because somebody decided, oh, we'll have these big ass levels because bigger is better. It'll be less linear. Except the levels end up with vast stretches of nothing going on. This is also the reason why The Elder Scrolls has been my whipping boy for most of my life, because it boasts about having these huge maps with fuck all in them for vast stretches of them.
Yeah. Just like, it can be too linear and be fine depending on how the story is, but it's okay to branch out very little. You can't do it too much, or else it's just going to become its whole other line that you didn't even know existed. until you got to that part
and
of it turning into its whole other line.
I can get what Ash is saying, though. A big part of my design philosophy is having it that things are done in a certain way because it fits the goals of that particular game. The other day I was doing Mecha Break with some folk, and I discussed why I don't mind the fact that game doesn't have full mech customization, because it's very clear that's not what it was built for. It was built for the pre-built designs, and so much of the design of the game is built around that. So having full customization would create more problems than it would solve, especially when you have very open maps. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Getting back on the rails regarding Outbreak. I feel like the big thing that was the selling point with Outbreak was just co-op.
Yes, yeah, their introduction to co-op was a really good, like, kind of breaking point for them, because then, you know, that kind of stemmed into later games that they released.
Yeah.
Was it a mess? Yes.
Yeah.
But a good one at the same time.
Yeah, I'd be willing to put the original Outbreak at Jill tier. Because there is definitely fun to be had with the experience, especially at the time. File 2, on the other hand, I feel like I need to put that in Chris tier. Largely because it's
a step down for sure.
It's less of
a step down
follow-up and more of an expansion pack in the style of some of those third-party expansion packs I remember seeing growing up, where it was just more. But beyond that, there wasn't a whole... I mean, it had some improvements, but those improvements weren't enough. Like nowadays, something like File 2 would be considered a DLC expansion pack.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it didn't actually add anything to Resident Evil as a whole compared to, like, Code Veronica, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, etc. It was just kind of there. It was just put there as a little test and prod and poke for them to see what they can really expand on. But it just did not work. It wasn't good.
Yeah. Now, but for whatever reason, this is another case where in the bottom they put them out of order. But the next one I wanted to cover was the Umbrella Chronicles, which
I actually liked the Umbrella Chronicles. They were good to me. Fight me on that. I don't care. But I'm a lore whore. I love lore. Yeah. And if you actually know the timeline between it, Resident Evil 0 and I think Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles is pretty much in the same time that it's happening, because while what is it, Rebecca and what was his name, Barry or some shit?
Yeah,
I can never remember him. Yeah, Barry. While they were doing their thing, I'm pretty sure Wesker was doing his thing. I'm just a whore. That's great. Me too.
Yeah. And unlike the other light gun games, this one decided to just be a no-frills, on-rails shooter approach, instead of trying to do, light gun, but you can move.
Yeah, no, it was a good mix for me. I really, really liked the Umbrella Chronicles.
So I'd be willing to
Very
put it
good for me.
tier.
Jill Tiller, it's justified. It has its little bumps in the road, so it definitely knocks it down a peg. But without the bumps, definitely an Ada tier. But with them, Jill tier. I'm perfectly fine with that.
I'd say the big takeaway is filling in some of the gaps when it comes to the timeline.
Yes. huge thing because it actually connected a lot of stuff that was happening in Resident Evil Zero. Because you can put two to two together. It's like, oh, this matches up with this, that matches up with that. Really good way to connect two different games, even though they were released so long ago.
Yeah.
And actually wanting to expand on a story that you had started is a really good way to reel people into your game.
Yeah. Now, for Resi 4, this is not even a contest, it's Leon tier.
Not even a fucking contest. Dog, the story. Leon. I can't say Ashley, fuck that bitch. Fucking Ada being included, Wesker being included, Krauser being included, because if you actually watch, Resident Evil, Degradation, that, I think that's the right movie, but Krauser and Leon's story is expanded on in Resident Evil 4, then you understand why Krauser's doing exactly what he's doing. Like, Los Iluminados, Plagas, I love that shit. Amazing game. It's what got me into Resident Evil, and then I was like, okay, let me backtrack and see what else they released.
I mentioned this elsewhere, but there's a lot of elements with Resident Evil 4 that makes me wonder if somebody on the writing team was a fan of giallo cinema. Now, for those who don't know, giallo is from the Italian word for yellow, gialla. It started out in I want to say the 1960s or 50s with a lot of pulp mystery novels getting translated into Italian, and a lot of them had these trademark yellow covers. Eventually, it got transferred over to film, which resulted in a lot of horror works that had some very ahead of their time practical effects when it came to gore, especially the works of Lucio Fulci, who has the nickname the Godfather of Gore.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how if that's really the case, but I could definitely see it, especially given the fact that even though they keep saying it's somewhere in Europe, but it's in fucking rural Spain. Let's not kid ourselves. Mm-hmm. But, and I will admit I did have a bit of fondness for them including Ada's own little episode in that.
Yeah, Separate Ways was a really good expansion on it.
Mm-hmm. And even though I didn't know about Krauser at the time, I did enjoy him showing up, even if he was a complete bitch.
He was a whiny little bitch. I cannot lie to you.
Yeah.
Such a whiny little bitch. Like, where? You lost your men. So did fucking Leon, but you don't see him literally injecting himself. Well, okay, he didn't even inject himself. It was during their mission that he got infected, but he let that shit take over. Like, okay, dog, we get it. You're sad. Wah.
Yeah.
Cry harder, bitch.
And even though it's not stated what agency Leon works for at that point, I've always had in my head that he was somehow contracted into the Secret Service, because that would be
pretty much that's what it was.
That would make sense. But when it comes to Resident Evil 5, I see Ash saying he worked directly for the president, then he would be Secret Service.
Yeah, in RE4 he's working directly for the service. I mean, in the original Resident Evil 4, that's not exactly what I can't remember what it's called. I think it's like BSAA? Something like that.
Started after that.
No, not BSAA. That's after. Mm-hmm. That's when Jill and that actually ties into Resident Evil 5. Crazy enough. Because then BSAA is co-founded by Jill and Chris.
Mm-hmm.
But I cannot remember the program that he was working for in the original, but in the remake, he is working for directly for the government or for the president.
I think what makes it all the more amusing when it comes to Resi 4 is a bit of timing, because this was mid to late 2000s, and right around that time, the Jason Bourne movies were making waves, and we were in the middle. We were in kind of a renaissance when it came to spy fiction, between the Bourne movies, between a more gritty tone with James Bond, between TV shows like Burn Notice and Leverage, as well as a little bit before that, stuff like 24 and Alias. It was a interesting time.
They were kind of just trying to fit into it, but broke that mold in such a significant way that Resident Evil 4, the original, it has such a hard stamp on survival puzzle horror that you cannot not talk about it.
Yeah, it is what the late Gary Paulson would call a sweet rifle. But 5 had the unenviable task of being a new generational entry, and as they say in Norway, jumping after Wikola, because it had to follow up 4. And a lot of the stuff that got shit on in 5 is stuff that could be considered products of its time, especially the boner that everybody had around this time for co-op.
Yeah. Another big thing, they completely said fuck all with the horror aspect of Resident Evil and just went more into the action, and that's also what makes me unfortunately put it in Chris tier. Like that, it's Chris tier for me. Not even trying to be funny. Introducing Sheva as another female lead and the story with Jillian Wesker included into it, very fucking good. Very, very lore heavy if you actually connect the dots to it. Love it, but the actual game, I can't. It's just a gun 'em down.
Yeah. If you're playing it co-op, it's better, but the AI was a point of frustration.
Yeah. See that I'm playing with Ash actually, currently trying to finish it. It's a lot better on co-op.
Yeah.
It's a lot better on co-op.
And I think the other problem for me was it was a bit too conservative when it came to introducing different types of monsters. Like it really doesn't expand on that a whole lot until the 3rd act.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that because you have to remember that Ada was in Resident Evil 4 because she was collecting a sample for Wesker, but of course, she betrayed him, etc., etc. He got a sample from Krauser, bringing back Los Plagas, so it's directly connected to Resident Evil 4. So then the story actually makes sense in, I think, Chapter 1, Act. Damn, what act was that? I don't remember. We were just playing it last week. That's the sad part.
Yeah.
And the pacing is very weird in Resident Evil 5. I can't lie to you. Very, very. It pisses me off. It pisses me off.
Going on the film notes, I think if they had instead of setting it in Africa, I think they might have had a better shot if they set it in Brazil and took some notes from like Tropa de Elite and City of God. It might have had a better shot when it came to its look, because so much of the way it's shot felt like a Brazilian movie more than something in Africa.
I can definitely agree with that. I can definitely agree with that. I also think that the way they did execute it could have 100% been better. Like I said before, completely lost the horror aspect. So then that just ripped one of the biggest parts of Resident Evil away from Resident Evil. So it's just like a random game within the franchise that doesn't really make sense. But the only reason why it makes sense is because of the connection to the story. It's Chris here.
Yeah.
Nothing more, nothing less.
But then we have the Mercenaries 3D, and I'm putting this in hunk tier.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a first wave 3DS game it was basically a handheld version of the Mercenaries mode that you were already playing on the last 3 games.
It was not good.
Like
it was not good at all.
It was a cute novelty, but considering that you're essentially getting a standalone version of a mode that has been standard for a while. There are just I remember when I saw it on the shelves when I was still working at my LGS, and I was just like, why?
Not the why. Like, what the shit in my store? Get it out of here.
Like doing a 3DS port of like Street Fighter. Okay, that I could get.
I mean, hell yeah. I mean, it's Street Fighter. Come on.
Yeah, but the Mercenaries, just no.
Not at all. Also, Pooks does bring a good point. The publicity drama behind Resident Evil 5 of like a white guy shooting up Africa, that was also very controversial for Capcom. And of course, they apologized for it. It was not their intention. Just trying to have a new setting. They learned their lesson. They definitely learned their lesson, I would have to say.
But obviously then we go to 2009 with the Dark Side Chronicles.
Dark Side Chronicles, my beloved. I like the Chronicles. The Chronicles are very good, period.
Yeah.
For me. Very, very lore heavy. And it's so well done for me. Everything actually makes sense. And when you actually put it together, oh God. It's like getting that last puzzle piece in the puzzle. It's really good.
And I'm willing to put it in Jill tier, I think, because I think both of the Chronicles games function as companion pieces to each other, since they're both
yes, 100%
of filling in the gaps in story.
That was 100% their purpose, because a lot of people, I would have to say, like, yeah, you can get lore from the manga, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily connect everything together compared to how Chronicles does it, because it actually stems from past events that you have so many holes in, and it finally fills those things up. And it allows you to understand exactly what's going on and what the future could look like for Resident Evil.
Yeah.
So they're just lore drop games, pretty much. And I love that.
Yeah. So then there was Revelations. And when it comes to Revelations, it was originally on the 3DS and then got ported to proper consoles.
Yeah.
I think the ports are better than the handheld versions.
Oh yeah. Fuck yeah. Fucking handheld made me mad. I can't lie to you. Okay. It's kind of a 50-50 for me. I can't lie. Like, I want to put it in Jill tier, but it's kind of tilting towards Chris. It was a funky little thing for me, because I did handheld. So that's the main reason why it's leaning towards Chris for me.
And I'd say, actually, I think this person put in the Chronicles thing twice. But for Revelations itself, I'd be willing to put that in Chris tier. With the caveat that if you're talking about the more recent ports, like the ports on PC and consoles and the like, that one I'd be willing to put higher.
Yes. It's just handheld was not good, and I can't get my hands on on the ports as of right now. I will get my hands on them though.
But then there's 6.
Go ahead, put that in Chris tier. Go ahead. It just completely said fuck all with Resident Evil and was like, yeah, let's just go la 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 down action road.
I think the best way to describe my take with Resident Evil 6 is, you ever hear the expression "too many cooks spoil the broth, but at least everyone's to blame"?
Yes. I know exactly what you mean.
That is the vibe I get out of Resident Evil 6. The idea
True.
of doing this global story that's taking place across multiple perspectives is certainly an ambitious thing, but it also shows why that ambition isn't used all that often. Because it's a logistical nightmare if you don't know what you're doing.
True. And it showed that they didn't know. Like, they knew horror. They knew lore. They did the lore part, but where was the horror? That was literally the main reason on why Resident Evil got popular in the first place. There was horror aspects to it. And the fact that they completely stripped that away without a second thought, that was the biggest downfall that Capcom ever could have released, besides Resistance and Versus.
Yeah. And, of course, then we have Revelations 2, which I know I put the original Revelations in Chris tier. Revelations 2, I'm willing to put in Jill tier.
You're right. You're right. I can't even lie. Very good game. Story, characters, like it has the action, it has the horror aspects. I like it. It could have just been better. I feel like there were some missing aspects to Revelations 2, but it's got to stay in Jill tier for me.
Yeah. I look at Revelations 2 as they took what worked and what didn't with the original Revelations and just chose to refine it.
Yes, exactly.
But then we get Operation Raccoon City, and I'm just gonna put this right here.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Handshake emoji on that one. It was not good.
I feel bad for the studio involved because they actually had ideas that they wanted to implement that probably would have worked. But
it would have made the game better. I know what you're talking about. It would have definitely improved the game for it to at least be tolerable, but I cannot tolerate that game.
Yeah. But
it's not good.
I should note that Operation Raccoon City was technically outsourced. And the studio involved were no strangers to Resident Evil, and they had ideas that they wanted to implement. But this was Capcom in the early 2010s, and they weren't exactly known for making smart decisions.
Dear God.
Plus, I think
you can say that again.
When it was announced, a lot of people had the attitude of why, like why after all these years are we going back to Raccoon City?
Yeah, it's already been exploded. It's been decimated and covered up. There's nothing more that we need to do when it comes to Resident Evil, or Raccoon City as a whole. We closed that chapter. Let's move on.
If you're going to try and salvage that in some sort of redo, just have a standalone story focusing on Hunk.
Yes, a standalone story that actually expands on Hunk and where he comes from, kind of. I know he's very shrouded in mystery, and that's the huge appeal around Hunk, but kind of give us an edge on who he might possibly be underneath that unkillable unit. Would be really good. I think that would be really good. And get the person who wrote Resident Evil Biohazard on that shit. Please do not get anybody else. Or fucking Resident Evil 4. Somebody. I don't fucking know. Don't get anybody else on that shit, or I swear to God, it will flop.
Yeah. Oh.
Your question is, who is Tofu? Don't worry about it.
Yeah, but Then I will note before I get into the next one, the whole episodic thing with Revelations, I could see that souring people at the time, but playing them in hindsight, I think is a much better experience than playing it as it came out at the time.
Yes, because at the time they had other games to actually follow up on, but didn't really execute the way they could have.
Mm-hmm. But then we have Umbrella Corps, and that's going right over there.
Thank you.
I hope to God you never tried to listen to these shoutcasts for Umbrella Corps. That is added to the reasons.
Unfortunately, I experienced that. Unfortunately, don't look that shit up, you guys. It's not good.
Let me start with this. Let me roll myself back. The idea of doing competitive shooting within the Resident Evil universe, in and of itself, is not a unsalvageable idea.
Yeah.
As is always the case here, the devil is in the details. And trying to play the competitive shooter straight alone. If I'm being honest, if somebody was to try and do what Umbrella Corps was trying to do again, I would just tell them, look at Siege, steal from that, half your work is done.
I mean, you're not wrong. That's the crazy part. It's just the way they did it was just not good.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's
literally a blueprint on doing that kind of game and bringing very popular franchises into that kind of game. It's not new. It's not. But they just didn't do it good at all. They literally butchered that shit. I cannot lie to you. It was butchered horribly.
Yeah. And it ended up doing so bad that there pretty much was nothing RE wise for quite a while. Actually, I have to take that back. There was only a year's gap, because Umbrella Corps came out in 2016 and Biohazard came out in 2017. And Resident Evil 7, if I'm being honest regarding that, it certainly was a proper reintroduction, but I can't ignore the fact that a lot of what it was doing veered a little close to Outlast.
Oh, it was very inspired by Outlast. You cannot lie. The way the horror aspect of it was just very prominent compared to like the more action that's usually present in Resident Evil. Put two and two together, the author or the director for Resident Evil 7, very, very inspired by how Outlast functions. And they did it well by making it their own. I cannot lie to you. Implementing Outlast aspects into Resident Evil was a very good idea. Very scary game. I'm very scared to play that shit. God, I still gotta go through all the games.
I think
overall, it's good.
I think what helps the horror is that, for one, the major influence can very much be seen. In this case, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It's very inspired by a lot of pop culture, in Western audience. Like when I first saw the trailer for it, I was like, this gives like Chainsaw Massacre with Outlast and like a dash of Resident Evil's like base. And I like it. It was good. You cannot deny it was good.
Now that being said, I will admit the third act goes a little bit longer than maybe it should have. Like it felt like things started to reach a natural conclusion and then it kept going. And that's really the only thing that stops it from being Leon tier. But I'm perfectly fine with putting Resident Evil 7 in Ada tier.
Well, Ash likes it in Leon tier, but everyone has their own opinions. I also think it belongs in Ada tier, again, because the ending kind of just runs on for a little too long. Because there was a point in time where you could have closed the story. at least for the time being. But then you didn't.
Yeah. And then we have the 2019 version of Resident Evil 2, which, you know, got a lot of acclaim.
A lot of love.
Was considered Game of the Year and was also considered a massive showcase for the new RE engine.
Oh, you cut out there.
Oh, sorry. Am I still there?
Yeah, you're still here.
All right. You know, the 2019 version of Resident Evil 2, I'd say was one of the big coming out parties for the RE engine that Capcom has been using in the years since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Also bringing a fan favorite game, especially after the success of the original Resident Evil 2, was a huge step for them, because now look at the games that we're getting and that we will be getting in the future. I'm very excited for Resident Evil 9.
Mm-hmm. But
I personally think it belongs in Ada tier, just for the fact that it's a remake.
Yeah, I could see that. And as far as the 2020 version of Resident Evil 3, I feel like that should be in Jill tier.
It's short, could have definitely been longer, but I still really like the game and I have a stain for it, because right now I'm doing a one life S rank run on Resident Evil 3 Remake on Inferno. So I have a little bit of a stain for it. So it definitely belongs in Jill tier.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can get that. And
I hate that fuck ass game.
You could say that time is a flat circle, because, you know, the original RE2, an outright classic, and then had a follow-up that was good but not quite as good, mostly because of the short amount of turnaround time.
And like it really does a good job of explaining why Jill was even in Raccoon City. Introducing Carlos. My puppy. Anyway, like very good addition to the remakes, definitely, because I know they wanted to keep the story consistent. So it was just by law that they remake 3, and especially bringing back Nemesis in a whole new look. That was a banger. They did that very well for me.
Yeah. And of course, also in 2020, we had Resistance, and...
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, and see that other one right there next to it that's kind of purple? Go ahead, put that shit in there.
Yeah.
Throw that shit in the garbage.
The idea...
I tried both of those. Ass. Because of DVD's success, they tried to kind of dip into that shit. Ass. Yeah. Ass.
And Reverse was essentially trying to be an arena shooter, which, why would you want to do that with Resident Evil?
Ass. I will continue to say that shit. They're both ass. Yeah. They're really bad. They were snorting mustard gas while they were making that shit, dog. I promise you.
Yeah, I never even touched Reverse, and then when I found out that it was ending its service later this year, I ended up going, oh no. Anyway.
So, I saw that announcement. I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, and you know what's so insane? If you buy Resident Evil 2 or 3, they give you those games for free because they're so bad.
Is that like is that like the meme
without your consent?
Is that like the meme of somebody breaking into your car and instead of stealing your concert tickets, adds more tickets?
Yes, literally. If you buy Resident Evil 2, it'll give you Resistance, and if you buy Resident Evil 3, it'll give you Reverse. So, guys, you do not have consent, but they will give you that dog shit. They're literally throwing shit in your lap. I hope you know that.
But then we have Village, and if I'm being honest, Village to a certain extent kind of had that same problem of the story seeming to reach a natural conclusion, but then it ends up going for a little while longer.
First, this section is the reason why.
Yeah, I'm willing to
100%. I understand you.
Village in Ada tier. I really like it, but there's just a few things that hold it back from being at the top.
You know, it just has so much that you can bite onto, but it's just too much to chew because of the Chris section. It was too elongated. I understand trying to connect Chris to Ethan Winters' story and like understanding that, oh my God, so like, I'm not going to spoil, but like, wow, that makes so much sense on why these things are happening, why Ethan can do these things. It's really good. But it's just too much. It's too long.
Yeah. And, of course, then I'm not sure why this particular tier maker has it in here twice, but then we have, at long last, the 2023 remake of Resident Evil 4, and I think it has to go in Leon tier. Much like the original. Mostly due to the fact that it decided to just not rock the boat in terms of what it's doing. Admittedly, the Ashley stuff is still a problem. It is slightly less of a problem, but if someone punched me below the belt slightly lighter, I'm still going on the ground. You know, the adage of is it worse to get shit on by a pigeon or a blue jay? Trick question, you're still getting shit on.
I'm literally getting shot in my knees when it comes to Ashley. I fucking hate her for some ungodly reason. I'm trying to fight a dog. She gets in front of the dog and I kill her. I'm like, that's not the kind of dog you want to protect, you stupid bitch. I'm trying to protect you. Fuck. She's a problem. She's an issue and I hate her. That's the only part of the game. Well, no. The Novistadors, the Regenerators, Verdugo. Those three motherfuckers are the three stooges of me literally shitting bricks the entire time of me playing that game.
Which, in all fairness, the Regenerators were a pain in the ass in the originals, so precedent.
Pain in the ass.
But and as far as what comes next, there's going to be a lot up in the air, but something that I do appreciate with 7 and 8, it's very clear what sort of horror that they're leaning into, especially horror films. Like 7 very much is channeling the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. 8, and I think this was outright stated at one point, though don't quote me on that, is very much channeling Bram Stoker's Dracula. And
I can see it. I can definitely see that, especially with Lady Dimitrescu. Absolutely. Fuck yeah.
But
I can definitely see that.
8 just has a lot of elements of European Gothic horror. And if they're going to go down that route, especially given the whole thing with BOWs being a central part of the conflicts, there is a golden opportunity to do something for a follow-up. Instead of taking notes from Dracula, crib notes from Frankenstein.
That would have been a lot better. I can definitely see where you're coming from with that. Dracula and Wolfman, I believe. Yeah, definitely with the lichens.
Mm-hmm. I'm not
There are a
saying
few
do that with 8, but
misses.
for a
Mhm.
but for a 9 potentially lean into Mary Shelley's work. If we're going to be doing this whole thing of leaning into classic horror for this sort of thing.
Yeah. They're definitely enjoyers of like Western media. You can definitely see that after 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a, and I think doing that kind of thing is a good way to reintegrate the horror aspect. But I do want to posit a few things to you. It's kind of food for thought.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is earlier we talked about the whole thing of adapting Resident Evil to tabletop, and I had that little digression about picking the right rule set. But in terms of picking a framing device for introducing a bunch of characters into the RE universe in a TTRPG form, what do you suppose would be a good framing device? I've got a couple ideas. I think one of the I know it would be tempting to say, playing as the named characters, playing as Leon, playing as Chris and whatnot. No, that's a terrible idea. There was an Indiana Jones game back in the 80s that tried that, and it got roasted over an open flame. No. I think an ideal framing device is building the player characters as BSAA agents.
That would actually be kind of good though. I can imagine that.
You know,
because playing as the official characters that already have a set lore is not a good idea. Things have already happened. There's no reason I'm trying to change that. So playing as kind of just like extras, that would be a lot better.
Yeah. The analogy that I've used is that nobody wants to play as the X-Men. They want to play as a student that happens to be in the Xavier Academy. A long time ago, I did a Doctor Who campaign, and I outright said, none of you are playing as Time Lords or anything like that. You're members of Torchwood. In doing so, it gives the room to mess around with the lore of Resident Evil without necessarily needing to involve the named cast. So it gives the GM wiggle room to play in that sandbox.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
And the other thing with especially in the last 2 games regarding BOWs is the concept of what can be a BOW has largely expanded due to the varying forms of mold.
And then there's so many variants of T virus, C virus, this, that, fucking V virus at this point. Code Veronica. Yeah. It's like, god damn. How many variants do you guys have? Ouroboros.
Yeah.
The fucking leeches. The plants. Like, oh my god, there's so many different things that you could play around with, especially in kind of like a sandbox setting, because of how many viruses there are in Resident Evil.
Yeah. It also gives room for a GM to make new ones. Or just variants or crossbreed breeds or what have you. The
Vixie Fox virus.
Yeah. I will admit one concept that I had been kicking around in the past was based on a bit of a theory that I had at the time after finishing Resident Evil 5 that
let me guess that Wesker wasn't actually dead.
Well, a Wesker died, but that was a body double.
You see, you and Ash are on that, and I can understand where you can pull it from, because you have to understand, and what is it? I think it was Umbrella Chronicles. there's Spencer actually tells Wesker that he is a part of the Wesker Children Project. I can understand where you're coming from, 100%. And we don't necessarily know what that project is because they have never expanded on it since then. So it's a possibility that Wesker, the real Wesker, is still alive. I can understand. It's just, I don't know. There's no further proof that he is.
Yeah. The spin that I had done was that Wesker had died, but there was a bit of a parting gift in certain people being effectively sleeper agents. Because one of the things I wanted to play along with horror is that there has been a certain undercurrent of spy fiction throughout the series.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with how Ada Wong has been an agent of some other organization that is never outright named, but is part of the reason she's so willing to stab pretty much anyone in the back.
Except for Leon.
Yeah.
That's her little puppy boy.
I think the main reason she hasn't done that to Leon is one, what you had said, and two, him being alive is an easy way to throw people off her scent.
True. Very true. She's used him in the past. She'll use him again in more ways than one.
Yeah, I've gotten a kick out of Dee Bride's comics that just have Leon as completely innocent to all of her double entendres.
Literally, it's so good.
But admittedly, through that you do have an angle, and the other reason I'd go with BSAA agents is because inevitably you'd have some people at the gaming table who are not as familiar. Maybe they are only familiar with Resident Evil by proxy. And in doing that, you have a nice jumping on point.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Because then you have a lot more to expand off of, because Resident Evil as a whole is like, the world is huge. There's things we still don't know. There's things that we do know that we could possibly connect to understand, but having so much freedom is literally playing in a children's sandbox.
Which is kind of the point with a TTRPG.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to the system in question, there is one that I can think of that would be an ideal fit. And that is Shiver, which was developed by the Menzies brothers. And in the interest of full disclosure, they are buddies of mine. I've worked with them in the past. But they have a particular brand of originally doing slasher-like horror, but have expanded to doing gothic or Monster of the Week style horror. And their system, which is mostly custom D6 based, would be an easy jumping on point, especially given how it handles archetypes. And those could be reinterpreted as the different types of agent. And yes, I would have the briefing, and with this recording will self-destruct in 3 seconds. Good luck. Because how could I not? But the key thing is not using any of the named characters, but using things that they were associated with, or potentially having the treasure of somebody finding one of the samurai edges that was thought lost.
Oh, you cut out there.
Sorry about that. I was saying
You're good.
One of the potential angles someone could do is having the fallout of someone just happening to find a samurai edge. The pistols that were given out to STARS agents, and only STARS agents. Though, admittedly, it is a... I've gotten a bit of amusement when Craig Ferguson did a breakdown of the different guns in the more recent Resident Evil games. One of the big ones is the Red 9, which is based on the Mauser broom handle.
Mm-hmm.
Which is absolutely hilarious that that thing is so effective, because when the Mauser broom handle came out, it was already outdated. Because it was using... And it was outdated in the First World War. It was using stripper clips when people were starting to already begin to use magazines. You know, you see most firearms, you have a magazine that that's full of bullets that you put into a firearm. With something like the broom handle, you had a bunch of bullets that were on this metal clip that you had to put onto the top and then manually put the bullets in. And if you didn't do it right, you could jam your thumb on the thing.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
There are a few things I don't know about Resident Evil, surprisingly.
Of course, when the Chicago typewriter got unlocked, I ended up joking, well, this is surprisingly jam-free for a Tommy gun. Tommy guns were notorious for being a jam machine.
Mm-hmm.
But the main reason why they became famous among gangsters was because, well, they were cheap to get. But because of the way drum magazines worked, and because, you know, a submachine gun wasn't quite fully refined yet, they would jam a lot.
Yeah.
And there's a reason...
In later installments, they did get better with that.
Yeah. There's a reason why drum magazines aren't used all that much. It takes a lot more time to load those up, because you've got to load them. You have to load them up in a spiral and then crank it. You know, I study pretty much everything, and that includes firearms, so I can see when things are a bit off when it comes to a given firearm. Though I'm not a expert. I mean, guys like Zach Hazard and Craig Ferguson blow me out of the water. But one of the other things that's been tried with RE that I'd like to pick your brain on whether or not it can actually work is is Resident Evil in full-on multiplayer form.
Yes. With the new systems and how like things can work now, absolutely, the game could be co-op. With
Not
their
co-op,
early installments,
full-on multiplayer.
Oh, multiplayer.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. I could see it as a way of you playing two completely different characters and then eventually meeting while also being in the same story, working on the same goal. That way it could work. I think it could work that way. If we're not talking about like complete co-op.
Yeah. I do think the possibility of asymmetric could work, but instead of trying to do the Dead by Daylight approach, I think there might be more legs in having, instead of having one person be the monster, have one person be the, for lack of a better term, director. Like the director AI system you'd see in Left 4 Dead.
Ooh. That actually might work. That would actually be really good for a Resident Evil game. Like if they can execute it properly, of course. I'm a little iffy about doing that. But I think that could definitely work, because then you already have something to build off of. You already have the source material. Just build off of that source material, and then you have a good game for a multiplayer game for Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm. And the big reason I would go in that direction is that it opens the possibility of doing multiplayer, you know, through things like having some sort of snap map system, so people are making custom maps. Even if the gameplay itself is lackluster, that's something that could keep bringing people back.
Hmm.
Because one of the most successful add-ons to the Halo series has been Forge, and has essentially become a staple ever since. And
Actually stopped following Halo, unfortunately. I need to get back into it, honestly. I used to play the fuck out of that shit.
yeah,
But continue, sorry.
but Forge is essentially a map editor, and people have used it to make very interesting and very terrifying things.
Mhm.
And through that, through that and through just user generated content with that, you can keep people coming back.
Hmm. Like actually giving them that sandbox to work with was definitely a huge advantage when it came to Halo, and just like kind of like pretty much your own world building without needing to really world build.
Yeah. As a I know I brought up the card game a while back, but I do want to clarify something on that.
Hmm.
That is not a card game in the sense of a traditional TCG. It is a deck building game. Uh,
Hmm.
the big difference is that obviously with a TCG, you're building your own custom deck and using that. With a deck builder, everybody's starting with a basic deck and cycling through it as they expand that deck.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't play TCGs like that. The only one that I'm playing at the moment is Pokemon Pocket.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who's very into TCGs. Tibble Mal, he plays Legend of Runeterra, and that's the only kind of TCG that I'm aware of. I didn't even know there was other types of TCGs that aren't just the traditional deck building.
Yeah, anyone who works with me is inevitably going to be exposed to a lot of games and a whole universe of possibilities. that's just how this kind of thing works. But admittedly, that project has been it has been inactive since 2013, but it wouldn't be too hard to get the cards, as well as the fact that I believe it is on Tabletop Simulator. And let me check.
Oh, please do.
So let's do a little search. Okay, that it ended up giving me text to speech. That's not what I asked for. So
One more try.
Resident Evil Tabletop Simulator. Let's see. Let me add card game to the search.
Yeah, I'm very EP. Work kicked my ass, but I was like, oh, Resident Evil tier list. I really want to do this Resident Evil tier list. That was the only thing keeping me going today.
I struck gold. I think I have struck gold if the site will finish loading. Yep. It is available on Tabletop Simulator.
Okay, great. But is there like a physical copy that I can get my grubby hands on? I need to know if there's a physical copy.
There are multiple sets. So let me
my wallet's gonna hate to see Resident Evil coming.
Yeah, though, because of the fact you're dealing with a game that's been out of print for a while, if you were to,
it's gonna be upscaled. I know.
Yeah, like on Amazon, it's like $150.
That's it.
Yeah, $150.
That's it. Fucking.
And something to keep in mind with both the board game and the deck building game is that it is built around a bunch of different scenarios, which means that you can have different ways to set up. Like, you remember what I talked about, that whole custom maps thing? that kind of
Yeah.
setup is within the board game. It's not one board. It's a collection of smaller tiles that you're going to be using to build the, well, mansion, for lack of a better term.
Hmm.
And this sort of scenario design is pretty common among a lot of different board games. I liken it to how you can have a bunch of different variants for games like Clue, which I think most people listening to this will be familiar with Clue by proxy. But
Guys, guys, is he dying for you? Am I lagging? He might have died. Hello?
I'm here.
Uh-oh. Okay, so it's it's on your end. It's coming from your end. You're like cutting out.
Actually, I think I know what the problem might be. It might be an issue with how Discord detects input sensitivity when it comes to my mic. Because sometimes I'm not as loud as
Oh
Discord
Lord
would like me to be.
Mildred.
How about now? What?
I think you're better now.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. I think it was because I had automatically detect input sensitivity on, and I think that was causing issues. So but when I look at this particular list, there's a decent spread. It is kind of funny to me that once again there's only 4 games in Leon tier, and one of them is just the same game twice.
It's not the same game fucking twice. It's a great game twice.
Yeah, I know. It's just that ended up happening the last time I did one of these ranking lists, so it's just amusing to me. But
I'm not biased.
No, not at all.
They're just good games.
But and I do think that if the horror aspect is to be maintained when it comes to Resident Evil, the best approach is going to be, cribbing notes from horror film, especially horror films from the 1980s and their successors.
For sure.
I do think it would have been very interesting to see what would have happened if Romero was actually allowed to make a full-on Resident Evil movie like was originally planned.
Yeah, that would have been so nice, honestly. But, legal issues and funding and all kinds of other things can get in the way of making something great. It sucks.
Yeah, I don't know what the reason was that it was dropped, and there could be no one reason, since what I've gradually learned over the years in studying this sort of thing is there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and
yes,
any one of those can be a reason why something tanks. But it's never just one thing. It is usually a succession of things. Some things get more blame than others, but no one thing gets sole blame for something sucking. And when it comes,
yeah.
And admittedly, in the case of something like, say, the remake of Resident Evil 3, I will give that one a little bit of slack, because I have to put the big ol' asterisk of made during the pandemic.
True. No, I feel like if Resident Evil 3 was not made during the pandemic and maybe like a year or two afterwards, it definitely could have been just a solid, even though it's a remake, yeah, but there's aspects of it that really make it, that kind of feel like it's a new game. I really like it.
And
if it was not made in 2020, like in that era, definitely would have had a better turnaround rate for it.
Yeah, and the big reason I say that kind of thing is when you have everybody working remote, or the majority of people working remote in something with a lot of moving parts like that, you're extending the grapevine when it comes to lines of communication. This was something I learned about when I was reading a postmortem on Final Fantasy 13 that was published in Game Developer Monthly, which I had a subscription to at the time. Because even though I don't develop video games personally, in terms of critiquing them, I find it best to study the whole of the development process. And there was one thing that was in that postmortem that I found very telling. And I'm pretty sure this was not an isolated case. It had talked about how the increase in staff that the 7th generation of gaming consoles required created very bloated subsections within studios. Because the art team was getting more people, the level design people were getting more folk, and more folk means more hands between those different fiefdoms getting exchanged, and essentially extending the grapevine effect. And a lot of Japanese studios had their studios operate in little mini fiefdoms. So you've got a team that's just handling art, you've got a team that's just handling level design, you've got a team that's just handling AI. And the whole concept of the vertical slice as we know it wasn't as much of a thing at the time in Japan.
Oh hell no.
It wouldn't be for a few years.
Definitely not in Japan.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no.
And because of those delays in communication, there wasn't a clear direction for a good amount of time. And if I'm being honest, a lot of video games that end up failing in one form or another end up being a victim of a failure to communicate. I look at Resi 6 and I'm like, there was not a clear vision. In any kind of project like this, whether it be a film, a game, you need that one person who is the guy. Now, sometimes the guy
for sure
is not a guy, but you need someone who is the guy. What my mentor would call the HIIC, head idiot in charge.
That's crazy. That is, I kind of like that though. I'm stealing that.
Yeah. The one person who every decision throughout the entire process, they have the final say on. For better and for worse, when it came to Resident Evil 2, the guy was Kamiya. Everything went through him. Obviously, he had people that he had to answer to as well, but he was the one who was most in charge of the way things were going. And you really need that in that kind of thing. With writing my own TTRPG, I've had to learn that the hard way, that I needed to be the guy.
Yeah, you'll learn very quickly depending on what projects you're working on. But I do want to kind of roll back to the aspect of Resident Evil 6 not having a good a good vision. It had a vision. Unfortunately, it was too many at the same time, because you can see where different aspects from different teams collided with another team.
Mm-hmm.
It was like having multiple perspectives to work with and multiple or multiple stories tying all into the same story with New Umbrella. It could work. It just didn't because there was just too much going on. It didn't have that head person in charge to actually make it a clear vision for the entirety of the full office to be able to work on, you know?
Yeah. I do remember having issues when it came to transferring data between the different chapters if you were if you're playing co-op for a campaign, you have to be doing that the whole time. Otherwise, between chapters, you end up getting stuck in a reset.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me before. It was just too much for. It was too much to bite and to at the same time, and it was so unfortunate because the game could have been so great if they just didn't do what Resident Evil 5 did, getting that bad reputation, nearly killing the Resident Evil. Well, not killing, of course not, but like nearly really staining the Resident Evil franchise. 7, that's what brought it back. And everybody can agree on that.
One of the big recurring memes I remember around that time was press release after press release about how they were going back to their roots. And this may be a bit controversial to some, this may be a bit blasphemous to some, but as I said, I'm going to give you the truth no matter how much it hurts.
Right.
I think the idea of chasing the roots may have exacerbated the problem. And I think the reason 7 and 8 worked as well as they did is because instead of trying to chase the roots, chase the past, it was more about creating a new experience with the for lack of a better term, mythos that the series has.
Yeah, no. I can 100% agree with you on that because compared to their past games, Resident Evil 7 and 8 have such a hard turn to an aspect that we didn't even know that we wanted. Because, like we said before, Resident Evil 7 being inspired by Chainsaw Massacre and Outlast, that was an aspect that we did not know that we wanted. But obviously the reception was really fucking good because the same guy who directed Resident Evil 7 is going to be directing Resident Evil 9. So that means we're going to have those horror aspects and have the like small, what's the word? Looking for a different word here. Like the small tidbits of Western horror or like, damn. My brain is like it's not functioning because I'm tired. I know what I'm trying to say, but I can't remember how to say it.
Yeah, meanwhile my brain is on
sicko mode right now.
No, it is every time is go time when it comes to how
I
operate. But that is something I can definitely see, and a big something else that certainly helps is not using the same set of protagonists as the playable perspective that has been done before, because people like Chris, Jill, all of them, there's not many other places for their stories to go as protagonists.
Yeah. We need Rebecca as the protagonist for once. It was only Resident Evil 0 that she was actually a protagonist. Because now they have her on the side. With any of the CGI movies that you see, unfortunately, she's just a side protagonist, you know? Yeah. Like, she's still, of course, going to be part of the main cast because, Rebecca Chambers, Jill Valentine, Chris, etc. They're always going to be the protagonist until they're dead. And we all know they're not killing off their protagonists.
Yeah. But pivoting them into more of a mentor role of the people who've seen some shit
Yes.
is a way to keep them in while also not suffering the problem of just repeating what came before.
Like the introduction of Ethan Winters, it was good. Mm-hmm. Very, very good. New character with Chris on the side. That was very well done, of him being like one of the main protagonists that we all know and love, now being a side protagonist for our new protagonist. Mm-hmm. And then they killed him.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, there wasn't a whole lot of other places you could really take his story, so...
True. Like, they ended his story well.
Yeah. My attitude when it comes to character or protagonist death in stories is, if you're going to do it, first have it mean something, and second, if only do it if there's not enough viable stories you could have told with them alive. And when it comes to Ethan, there's not a whole lot of places you could take his story after what happened. Now, could I see his daughter taking a role? Possibly, though you'd have a lot of questions, since there's going to be a lot of eyes on her.
Yes.
But I will admit I'm partial to that, because I'm partial to the idea of generational protagonists.
Yes, I also like that idea.
Yeah, and
I need her to say a fucking pocket knife.
Yeah, and
just like her dad.
Yeah, that and legacy heroes.
Yes.
Like the multiple generations of the Belmont family, or the multiple generations of the Joestars over the decades. I will always have a soft spot for that kind of concept. Mm-hmm. Even if it's...
Like with Castlevania. Mm-hmm. Like you have Castlevania, the first one, and then you have Castlevania Nocturne, where we have Trevor Belmont, and then we have... What was the other Belmont's name?
Juste.
Yes. Like we have more than one of the same bloodline, or like a whole new generation of people that we can work with, but it's still in the same timeline, and it's still in the same like kind of group that we all know and love, just new people.
Yeah. I brought up JoJo with this because for several parts of that series, you were dealing with a direct descendant, or sometimes an indirect descendant of the original Jonathan Joestar.
Yeah, I've never watched JoJo, so I'm just agreeing with you. Mm-hmm. You know better than me.
Yeah. Well, part 1 had Jonathan Joestar. Part 2 has his son, Joseph. Mm-hmm. And isn't Jonathan 17 though? Well, I mean, if he has a kid, I'm sure he's a grown-ass adult. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And obviously there's a gap of time between the different parts.
Right.
But it's in that same vein. And
Base is saying that it was his grandson.
My bad. I think I got some stuff cross-wired. But I would also say that the pivot that we saw with 7 and 8 is a good demonstration of avoiding something that I've talked about many times in my monastery. We have a mantra called Designed by Gospel. Designed by Gospel is basically designing things a certain way because we've always designed things a certain way.
Right.
And one of the big examples I often point to is sim-style racing. And how a lot of games in that genre, especially over the last decade, feel very much the same. Because a lot of them are doing this mindset of, we have to do things this way. Not because it fits the design goals or what our studio can do, but just because that's the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
And if one were to take that approach with Resident Evil, you'd have a dozen or so games that just focus on Leon, and Leon would overstay his welcome.
He's always welcome, but but like I can 100% see where you're coming from. There's a point in time where it's okay